thank you also for being on with us today. This is a gift of time for yourself, and we hope that you enjoy your time. And we've got our mountainscape that we're going to do together. And I have brushes. I have a number of different brushes. One of them is called a fan brush. So it looks just like a fan, just like what it's called. I also have a pokey brush. These I get from the dollar store. And these are 3 or 4 for a couple of dollars. And they're really hard, but they're great for trees, for the leaves, as well as the little dots at the tops of the trees. That's what the fan brush is good for. And then I have a number of other brushes, round brushes, anywhere from a 0 to a 6. I've got a couple of wide brushes. This straight brush is very good for that shoreline. If you don't have that, just a pointed brush will be fine. So we will create that shoreline as well. Hooker's green is the darker one. Let me see if I can put it on. Let me get a piece of canvas here. Okay, this is sap green. And this is Hooker green. Oops, let me get a good bunch of it on there. So it's just there's a different green.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And if you have other greens in your tray that you want to try, go ahead and try them. There's also an emerald green. There's a dusk green. There's lots of different greens if you want to really mix up your forest. If you wanted to do emerald green, it's like I would say it's more like leprechaun-y. Yeah, so. All right, we're at the top of the hour. We're actually past the hour, so my apologies. But thank you for the yeses, and I'm glad that you're as excited as I am to teach that lighthouse, and you're just as happy to learn it. So let's get into art mode. Let's take 3 deep breaths in and hold it at the top momentarily and focus on something that makes you smile. It just makes you feel warm inside. And then after you've got that fixed and you got a little smile, then you can release and really drop those shoulders down. Really release the area in here. Just, we get tense in here. So let's see if we can open some of that up. So first, deep breath in and hold it at the top. And smile and release. And our second deep breath in and hold it at the top and smile and release. Really let that go. And our third deep breath in and hold it and smile and release. Really let that go. Give yourself a little massage if you need. And I think you'll find if you have a tense moment throughout the day, if you give yourself that 3 deep breaths exercise, it just takes away a lot of tension. So worth a try. So give yourself that gift. But with that, thank you again for joining me and taking your time in your day to be with me. And I hope you get something interesting and fun out of today's class. So let me just turn my camera around and we'll look at the sketch. And this sketch it's a mountainscape. I also have a couple of buckets of water. One I keep clear and one I use just to rinse my brushes off. We also have our card drawn for halftime that I will read, just as sort of an intermission, but it also gives you a moment or two. If you haven't caught up to where we are, it will allow you that extra time to catch up. So not to think that you need to have everything perfect. Also handy to have some paper towel on hand. I take 1 sheet of paper towel and I actually cut it into 6 pieces. So it goes a long way. Sometimes what I do is with the roll of paper towel and a pair of scissors, I just set it in front of the television if I'm watching the news. Then I've got a little project to do on the side and I just cut them up and then I'm ready for the next time I want to paint. So just a little side idea of what I do. Now, the first color that we're going to do is aquamarine blue. The reason we're going to do aquamarine blue is because it's a cool color. So we're doing some mountains, so we want a cool look. So I'm going to use my biggest brush, my pointed brush, and I'm just going to use clear water, and I'm going to paint above that horizon line. So this is my horizon line, goes from side to side. I'm going to paint above the mountains. I can paint right over those bushes or bulrushes, but I'm going to go right over the tops of the mountains with just clear water. And I'm going to go right to the very top, right to the very top, all the way across. So just get some nice water on there. If you're wondering if you've got all of your surface, if you hold it on an angle where the light will shine, you'll see dry spots. So feel free to lift mine is on an easel, so feel free to lift your canvas and move it around, hold it up to the light or so that the light shines on it. So if you see blank spaces, you'll know you need to put a little bit of water on there. So just double check all of your areas. We're priming the canvas, ready to receive our paint. And I hope you enjoy today. If I go too fast, if you need me to slow down, you can open your mic and just ask me, and I can tier it to your pace, not to. Sometimes I get excited about a color or something that I'm doing and I get a little carried away. So our color with this is aquamarine blue. So it's a cool blue. Not so much a sunny day blue, more of a deeper blue. So now I'm just going to paint that on from side to side. I've primed my canvas, so when I put that paint on, it's going to start to move. And I can go right over those bulrushes and those reeds right down to the side. And you see, it's not about perfection. I've got some lights and darks, and I've got some lines and some squiggles. I'm just trying to get that paint on to cover the surface. I'm just going to go right down. It's not all going to run. Even if you're on an easel, if that paint was drying a little bit, then it will force you to work a little bit harder on some spots. And if you have lights and darks, a little bit lighter in spots, a little bit darker in spots, that's okay too. But do take your color if you can, right to the tops of those mountains. And if while it's still wet, you start to get what looks like a little cauliflower mark as it dries, just use your brush and brush that through so that it tones it down or cuts it out. And once I have that color on there, I'm going to take my paper towel. It's just slightly dampened paper towel. And I'm going to use it just to lift off some of those colors. I'm going to create the look of a cloudy day. Just gently using my paper towel to lift off some of that color. So you can see it looks wispy in some spots, a little bit darker in other spots, and that's okay. And I can take a little tiny bit here and there at the top of a couple of mountains. Just tap and lighten some of that up. But be gentle with your canvas. And although it may seem a little odd, I've taken off some color and I'm going to add a little bit back in. This time I can direct where I want it to be. So underneath some of the white spots, I can add a little bit deeper blue. So back to that same blue, but I'm just going to give, and I'm doing it underneath the white spots. So where I find a really clear spot, I can add a little bit of deeper color underneath, just to emphasize the look of a cloud. So it's the same color, but because the first color has dried, by adding on the same color, it's going to give me a different dimension, a different depth of color. Now I want to use the same color for the water below, but I'm not putting the blue at my horizon line. I'm going to visually cut my bottom part where the water is in half. So halfway along, I'm just going to draw a line of water, and it doesn't have to be a perfect line. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but just the bottom quarter is going to be wet. Just the bottom quarter. So I'm leaving this center section. I'm not putting any color in there at this point. Only from the third quarter, the bottom quarter. And then I'm going to come back with my ultramarine blue and pop that color in. This is my ultramarine blue. This is my water. Yes, it's all water here, but I'm going to have a lot of green in that water higher up. So I just want this blue down below. And again, I'm not looking for perfect strokes. I'm not looking for an even, solid line. I can make some waves in the water. I can have some spots deeper or darker. And I'm going to go right over those reeds so that when I put those reeds in, they're going to show that movement of water behind them. And as I have some pooling at the bottom, I'm just going to take my paper towel along the bottom of my canvas and just let it soak up any excess that's dripping on there. Once I have that on there, the same as up above, I just want to make a few marks. It looks like the reflection of clouds in the water. And what's beautiful about watercolor is if you're not entirely happy if it's too light or too dark, you can always add a little bit of water. You can move it around. If it just seems like a little bit too much in your clouds in the water, go ahead and add a little bit of dark, a little bit of detail. And you can go back if you still feel like you want a little bit extra lines. Just tap some of that out. So there's a lot of play with watercolor. And it doesn't have to be finished. If you think that you're finished or you want to change it, you can move things around. Just use your brush. I'm just giving people time to finish up, but I'm just showing you that there's a lot of time and play that can happen with your watercolors. So we have the bottom part. This is still wet. Before I put any color in this section, I'm going to move to the mountains because I believe my sky will be dry enough now that I can work on my mountains. So using black, I'm going to paint my mountains, but I'm using black paint and I'm adding water. So you see when I add water, it gives me a totally different, it's not black anymore. It turns into a gray. So we're looking for a soft gray with your mountains. You can always add more color. You see how that black totally turned to a really soft, light gray. So let's paint those mountains in that soft gray color. So it's black, just watered down. And we're just painting the actual mountains. We're not worried about size of the mountains. We'll come back and do some more detailing. But at this time, we just want the color on the mountains. And if they're lighter and darker in spots, or if one mountain's lighter than or darker than another one, that's okay. Not to beat yourself up about a piece of paper. So please keep that in mind, that it is just a piece of paper. And if you want to redo it, try it again. The recording will be available for you. Just trust in what the paint's going to do and that your abilities will shine through. And this will be a beautiful piece of art for you. The nice thing about watercolor or learning to paint anything is you never have to buy another gift card again if you don't want to, because you can paint and make your own cards. And it's a lovely gift to receive. It's a lovely gift to give. So be proud of what you end up with today. And if you're not, as I said, you're not completely satisfied, you can always repeat the process. There's a nice bank of mountains painted in the background. As I said, some have lighter or darker spots on them, but they're all just a tan or a very light gray, a smoky gray. We will come back and do some details. We're just going to let those dry. And at this time, we painted right over our trees. I'm not worried about those trees. They're going to be silhouettes. They'll be black. They'll show up beautifully. And we painted over our reeds and our bulrushes from the corner. So that's okay. They're going to be silhouettes, so they will show up beautifully. And if you've gone beyond the edge of one of your mountains, here's an example. I've got a little piece of gray that I painted over just past the edge. That's okay. Who knows? That could be a mountain in the distance way back there. So I'm not concerned about that. And I hope you're not stressed if that's happened to you either. And if you feel the need at any point, just take a deep breath, smile and drop your shoulders back down. I think you'll find your painting will be that much more at ease. We're going to blend two colors together and we'll end up with sort of a lime green color. And that's from mixing sap green I like to mix colors together to blend them, and ochre. So I have those two colors. If you don't have sap green and ochre, if you mix a different green, which is Hooker's green and yellow, if I mix yellow, let me find some yellow, then I'll come up with a similar color. I'm just looking for a light color for the water. So blending these two together is going to give me a little bit of a murky color, but it will also look like a reflection from the trees. So I'm going to start at my horizon line with this color. This is with sap green or whatever green you've got, and ochre. And I'm going to go right across my horizon line, right to the other side. We're just letting those mountains dry. We'll come back and do some details later. I'm going to bring that color, this green, this sap green and ochre mixed together. And I know it takes some of you a minute or so to pull your colors out. I have them all on a tray in front of me, so but I know it takes a minute or so to get everything together. So a little, even if it turns out I've had to mix a little bit more and it's a little bit darker, that's okay. So what I'm looking for is a reflection, and I haven't put my trees in there yet, but it's a reflection from the trees in the water. So I'm just going from side to side. And I'm going to do the same that I did up above, or sorry, down below with the clouds in the water. I'm going to put a little bit of clouds here and there. Just using a paper towel. I'm just going to wipe and just add just a few lines. Just blend that. Just make a few little lighter lines. And if it's already dried, because we were doing wet on dry, then just dampen a paper towel, and I think you'll find it will lift some of that color. Now, what it looks like, I have a deliberate line between my green and my blue, and that's not the intent that I want. I want to bring the two together. So I'm going to mix, going back into my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to paint a little bit of that ultramarine blue up into the green so it starts to blend together. I'm just looking to soften that line. And even if I need to dampen my brush with just plain water, just to get that to blend together. And it's okay if I bring some of that green down into the blue, that's okay too. So play with it. It's a reflection of above. So just have some fun and see what, when you move that damp brush around, what happens to your water. And believe it or not, we've made it to half time already. So we're halfway through the class. So you can take a moment to finish up where you are, and I'll read the card that was drawn. So this card says, I am love. Be the presence of love. Let the spirit of love flow through you. Interesting if you really get into that thought of love while you're painting this picture, how it will change how your art will end up. So just see if you can be in the spirit of love. Be the presence of love. Let the spirit of love flow through you. So thank you for choosing that card. The person that said stop when I was holding them up, that was at the very beginning, early on in the class before we got going. So thank you so much. That applies to everyone in the class. So let's go back to these mountains and we'll work on these mountains. And what we want on the mountains is on one side of each mountain, we want a little bit of a darker spot, only on one side. So using my black, still thinning it out a little bit. I don't want it completely black. But I'll start with the center. And I just want to paint the one edge. And I'm going to stop at the top. So I'm going to do that on all of my mountains. I'm painting one edge only. And what I want to show is which mountain is in the front. So this mountain is in front of this mountain. This mountain is in front of this mountain. But I only want to paint one side dark. So each mountain, I'm looking to see what is in front. And this mountain, I'm not going to paint this edge. I'm only painting one edge of each mountain. And if you've painted and it looks like, oh, it's really, really dark, that's okay. We're still going to do some more work with this. So don't stress on that. And now that you've got that on there, with your brush rinsed off in clean water and tapped off on paper towel, so it's only a damp brush. And we're going to start to cut down that edge so that it's really close to the line. So you may need to go back into your water a few times just to soften. We're only looking for a really tiny line on the edge of your mountain. So you're going to move that paint so that it doesn't look like a solid line. So the paint will move. It doesn't have any other choice, but we just want a soft, soft edge. So you're bringing the mountain down, but leaving that edge. It takes a little bit of practice to do this, lifting off or moving it. But once you get it, you'll go, oh, I get it. It's great. So if you need more water to move that, go ahead and get some more water on your brush. And you may end up, because you're brushing, you may end up brushing some of that into your mountain, but we're looking for your mountain to be lighter than your edge. So you can see there's a darker spot on the tops of the left-hand side of your mountain. So there's just that darker spot at the outer edge. So using dark again, we'll go back with just on the edge, just a little bit. We're just going to make a shadow of the mountain behind it. So here there's a little bit of a shadow coming from behind the mountain. Still using that light gray. So there's a shadow on the outside of that mountain coming down. So you can see more clearly which one is in front. Now we are going to have trees in front of these mountains, so it's any of the mountains that are down below will be covered over with greenery, so not to think, oh, it's not as good as I want it to be. We're going to cover a lot of this over with foliage, with trees and landscape. Now the next color I'm going to use is sap green. So we're going to start to build on that forest. And I'm using this little brush, this pokey brush, and I'm actually painting the top of my brush. So I'm not wetting my brush. I'm just putting wet paint on the top. If I wet this brush, I'll end up with far too much water in there. And so I'm going to start just by pressing the paint. It's gonna look too much water there from paint from my brush. I'm just pressing the paint onto the canvas all the way across. So I'm leaving gaps in between, but this is sap green going all the way across, a few gaps in between, because I don't want all the same color. So you can see already it looks a little bit like a forest. And I've got some that has come down into the water. That's okay. I can use my finger. I can just brush that side, mix it in with the water. And then I'm going to switch from sap green. I'm not rinsing my brush off, but I'm going to switch from sap green, a little bit of water in my Hooker's green puddle. I'm going to put Hooker's green on the end of my brush. So you can see it's a little bit darker. And I'm going to start to create the look of some bigger trees. So I'm going in an upward motion. And if I hit onto my canvas, I'm not worried about that. I can blend that with my finger. It'll just look like it's a reflection in the water. So now I have two different sets of colors. I have a sap green on there. And I have Hooker's green. Because I want it to look like a true forest or as close as possible, I need to add my next color, which is ochre. If you want to add yellow, if that's the color that you've got, that's fine. We're just looking for a different color. So putting this pokey brush into my ochre. I'm going to start just to create a little bit of color in my forest. So it could look like it's in behind, it could be in front. And again, if I get it on my canvas, I can just blend that into the water and just make that look like a reflection. So I could use a brush, but I have my finger handy, so that's what I'm using. I'd also like to have some definitive looking trees. So with my Hooker's green, I'm going to make a few marks, and I'm just going straight up and down. Just some flicks in the background to look like trees. This is just back to the hooker's green. And I have a little bit in the water, so I'm just going to blend that in with my finger. Just blend a little bit. Now I need to let some of this dry before I do a whole lot more, but I'm going to use my fan brush with the sap green. So a fan brush will give me really interesting marks that would be difficult to paint any other way. So it can give me the look of fine branches for trees. It can also do this for grass. That's the beauty of a fan brush. So if you have a fan brush, good. If you don't have a fan brush, you can still do a similar effect. So if I just use a pointed brush, I can do just some small markings. So with my fan brush, I'm just going to put some little dots up above the trees. So I'm just using the tip of the fan brush, and it's just giving me some little, and I can do that sideways. I can put some in lower if I want. So I've lost a little bit of my trees that I did going upward. So I'm going to recreate those and add them back on with sap green. There's a reason that I'm putting these in, and you'll see in a moment. So I'm just using sap green, just bringing those back in. They've kind of blended with the background. So I want them to be more defined. And the next color I'm going to bring in is black. So I'm using a black paint, and I want to start to create the look of a shadow between the trees. So on either side of one of those trees that I just painted in, I'm going to put a dark black line. So they're fairly narrow. I want them to be as narrow as possible. And I can even create the look of a tree just by doing some side branches. I'm also with black going to create those evergreens that are in the forest. I've kind of lost mine, so I'm going to, there's one in the center here. So if you make your stem coming up and then going from side to side, smaller as you get to the top, you create the look of an evergreen. So if I show you that just on a blank, I've got my trunk of my tree. Doesn't even have to be necessarily straight. It's wider at the bottom and almost like a swizzle stick coming up. And there I have my evergreen. If I want to add a few little extra branches out, I can do that. But there's my evergreen in the forest. So I'll do one in this nice little white spot here, starting wide, getting smaller and smaller as I go up. Doesn't even have to have a full top or necessarily even straight branches. And I like to do odd numbers rather than even. So I'm going to put a third one. I've got a little white spot over here. So I'm going to do the trunk of a tree. And then starting at the bottom, I'm just going to do that swizzle stick effect just till I get to the top. And before I finish with this and start to do my reeds coming up the side, I think I want just a little bit more fuller forest. And so just with my brush with sap green on it, I'm just going to fill in just with a side brush. I'm just using the side of my brush, and I'm just going to fill in a few spots, just raise it a little bit higher, just give it a little more depth. So again, I'm just using the side of my brush, just sideways, just tapping on the color. And I'm going to raise this end just that ever bit more to cover over that one little mountain at the side. Now we want to create that shoreline. So one of the things I had mentioned at the beginning, if you had one, is a flat brush. So these brushes, when I turn them on their side, you can see that they're flat. So when I dip that brush into clear water and tap it off, I can take this brush and run it along my shoreline and lift off color. I'm using clear water and just running along the shoreline. So it's hit into some of the black, so it looks like it's really dark, but eventually by just continuing to move along, it's going to get lighter. So I'm just running along the shoreline with clear water. So each time I do it, I take my brush and wipe it off on the paper towel. So it's getting clean each time. Each time I do it, I tap off on the paper towel and take that color off my brush. If I end up with a lot of dark, then I'll go back into my water and clean it off again. But you see it's starting to lighten along the shoreline. Just be gentle with your canvas. If it feels like it's starting to pull on your canvas, then just let it dry for a few minutes. But what we're trying to do is just clear off color. Now we'll just let that dry for a moment or so. We'll come back onto the top of our mountains with a very tiny brush. I'm using number 2, I think, number 3. And I'm just going to put a little bit extra tip on my mountains. Just the slightest tip to give them nice height. And with that done, we'll move on to our reeds in the water. There's a little bit of a stick here, so I'm just going to use plain black paint. And if you don't have a steady hand for this, this is a great project for you. It's not necessary to have a steady hand. You can practice ahead of time before you hit the canvas if you need to. You can practice on just a piece of paper. And I'm just going to put a few little dots. And I'm not going to my forest yet. I'm only doing the reeds down below. So it's just a wispy motion. So hopefully you have this drawn, and where you have it drawn, you can do on the lines you've got drawn already. If you want to add in more, that would be amazing. Be my guest. This is your art, so you've created this. And remember, reeds, when they grow, sometimes they curl over, sometimes they go right, sometimes they go left. So it doesn't have to be a straight line. And once you get to this point, you can go back up into your sky and you can fill in your bulrushes. So if you're looking for an easy way to do these, if you do some lines on either side, and then just fill in the center, and then just give a little point off the end. So it's lines on either side, fill in the center, and a little flick for the end. And then you can just join that back down to another branch in the water. And I'll continue. Again, just some dots on either side, join it in the middle, and then a little flick off the end. And I'll join it down to the branch in the water. And I'm just using my baby finger just to support myself as I brush. Sometimes that helps, just having a little bit of support. And as you saw, we started with those branches in the water and then we joined them together. So it doesn't all have to be done in one swell swoop in one movement. It can be many. It can be an accumulation of. And if you feel like you want to add a few more, go right ahead. And what also adds when you're doing any kind of bulrush or any kind of grasses is just to add a few dots. It's just sometimes there's just a few little seed pods fall off, and it really adds to your picture. So it's okay to add just a few little dots here and there, just to give the eye something more to look at. And then lastly, what you want to do is sign your art. Please remember to sign your art. It's important to take credit for what you've done. And there you have it. That's what you can do in 1 hour. I hope you've enjoyed that and got some tips and tricks and learned a little bit more about some of those brushes and different techniques. Bye, everybody.